On July 16, 1969, Apollo 11 launched, resulting in the first ever spaceflight to result in putting a man on the moon. Today, 50 years later, although the technology has changed, this achievement is no less amazing. After the launch of the Soviet satellite Sputnik, the United States and the Soviet Union entered what is today known as the space race. On April 12, 1961, the Soviets launched Yuri Gagarin into space, making him the first ever known man in space. This triggered an even stronger push for spaceflight in America, with the launch of our first man in space, Shepard, just 1 month later. President Kennedy announced to the nation that our goal should be to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. In order to land on the moon, it was decided a lunar orbit rendezvous would be the best option. The spacecraft was to have 3 parts: the command module, where the astronauts would sit, the service module to support the command module, with basic needs like oxygen, water, and electricity, and the lunar module for landing on the moon. Project Gemini developed the rockets and modules needed for this mission. Although Apollo 1 resulted in a fire, America was not quick to give up. By late 1968, Apollo 7 tested out Earth orbit and Apollo 8 tested out lunar. In May of 1969, Apollo 10 acted as the dress rehearsal for the moon landing. On July 16, 1969, at 9:32 local time, the Saturn V rocket blasted off. On July 20th, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin entered the Eagle and began their lunar descent. While descending, Armstrong and Aldrin realized they were passing landmarks too quickly, therefore were coming in too fast. Luckily, the problem ended up not being too severe, and they proceeded just as planned. When they approached the landing site, Armstrong noticed it now had a crater in it. He only had about 90 seconds of fuel left and was about 100 feet above the moon's surface. At 20:17:40 UTC on July 20th, the lunar module had landed. It was at this point Armstrong spoke the now famous words, "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." 2 hours after landing, Aldrin sent a radio broadcast to Earth to ask everyone to give thanks in their own way for such a historical event. Following his broadcast, he took communion privately, as NASA was under a lawsuit over the reading of Genesis and Apollo 8 over the radio. On the foot of the lander was a plaque to be left there, reading, "Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind." The plaque had the signatures of all 3 astronauts and President Nixon. The preparations for the moonwalk took an hour and a half longer than expected. At 2:51 UTC, Neil Armstrong stepped out of the lunar module for his famous first steps on the moon, saying, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." The planting of the American flag was the one job the astronauts wanted to go smoothly above all else. However, the telescoping flagpole was only able to be planted about 5 centimeters into the ground. After 21.5 hours on the surface of the moon, the lunar lander was reboarded and began its ascent. On July 21st at 21:24 UTC, the Eagle successfully rendezvoused with Columbia, piloted by Michael Collins. On July 24th, Columbia splashed down into the Pacific Ocean, with the USS Hornet there to pick the astronauts up. The astronauts were immediately placed into quarantine in case they picked up anything from the moon. Apollo 11 had been successful, and the United States considered this a major victory in their ongoing space race. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm Matthew, and I hope I'll see you next time.
Goodbye, goodbye, wet a tear, baby dear, from your eye. Though it's hard to part, I know, I'll be sick of the death to go. Don't cry, don't die, there's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir, old thing, cheerio, chin chin, na boo toodaloo, goodbye.